Greetings. Doing a little bit of lettering, something more abstract than the usual, which is a theme that's set up with this page right here. The idea of so many ghosts. And in previous pages, you have one of the characters going after skulls, which are the remnants of experiments. But the one thing they're looking for is the one skull that's essentially this ghost of a space traveler that's long since passed on into the cosmos, so to speak. And we're getting into a little bit of the mania because the character doesn't know he's passed on because he's so well invested in being the ghost that it's tough for the character to realize that that's exactly what he is. Doing some liquid mask. A little bit of this is kind of play. You're experimenting, but you have a point, a goal to work on. A design. Something in the back of your mind, maybe. And you're just working on it. See where it goes. Nothing crazy. Unless you want it to be a little manic and crazy. Gets me thinking. The brain wanders quite a lot when I'm doing this. And inevitably, it leads to ruminations on the coming revolution of AI. I don't like obsessing over stupid things like that. It's like so many other things that one gets obsessed over. You get fixated on it. It becomes a neuroses or a fetish. Before you know it, it takes over every aspect. But the thing that I find kind of interesting is the grand scheme of things when it comes to the grand religion, the religion, it has to be considered a religion, of modern technological progress. That because it's technological progress, it must be good. It must make everyone's lives better. And in the grand scheme of things, you could say that, for the most part, it has. Apart from the usual trade-offs. I mean, what was the selling point? The selling point was that it would get people out of the dreary labor of the field, the sweatshop, and that people could utilize more intellectual pursuits. They could have careers that are more intellectual, that require more brain power than muscle. And that was the whole selling point for modern progress. That you could work in an office building instead of a factory. I mean, factory work is still there. Construction work is still there. And it became quite a defining line between the classes of people, the blue collar, the white collar, like street gangs. And I find it very interesting because that's been the selling point for modern progress, that you would just find yourself with more intellectual careers, more lucrative careers, because they were so much more intellectually invested. And then here comes the promises of AI. And then what AI is going to do is it's going to rob you of all those intellectual opportunities. Because all of those intellectual jobs, well, they're going to be replaced by AI. So at first, the modern religion of progress will tell you that you should invest in your mind, go find jobs that are intellectual. Get yourself out of the field, out of the factory. And lo and behold, and not in so many decades, what happens? Well, AI is going to replace all those jobs, all those intellectual jobs, those white-collar jobs. Why? Because the companies that employed you find you as an unnecessary cost that needs to be disposed of. That's it. That is it. And it's interesting, too, because these companies didn't form out of a vapor. They didn't form out of the ether. They were put in the place that they are in because the people who paid for their services and bought their products. It's that weird cycle of progress. Someone comes up with a new device, a new doohickey, and they need to make money. So they sell it to the public, and the public buys it because they buy into the fact that it's a new thing, and they need to have this new thing, so they buy the new thing, and it makes that company money. And it's a symbiotic relationship. And now, these companies that used to make things, and now they just make value for the shareholders, are going to take that symbiotic relationship between them as producers and the consumer and sell the consumer short by investing in technology that would make those consumers essentially unemployable. So it was the consumer that put these companies where they're at. And now, just for the sake of shaving off a few percentage points in their costs, they're going to sell those people who put them in those positions down the river just to save a few pennies. Or for the chance of saving those few pennies. Quite a sad state of affairs, really. To break that symbiotic connection between producers and consumers. Because the consumer being the consumer is no longer valuable to the producer. Of course, then again, this kind of makes sense because the producers don't really produce anything anymore. What do they produce? Temporary items, things made of plastic that break within a few years or a few months. So basically, you're not buying anything, you're just leasing the object. Because what you buy the idea of a thing. because you find yourself having to go back and buy it again and again and again and again. And perhaps this line of progress is the logical outcome. That this was the only outcome that would ever happen. Perhaps. And being that it's the only logical outcome, then it has to play itself out. Maybe it will turn into some grand utopia. But snake oil salesmen selling you utopia are very rarely selling you anything that's real. They sell you a hope, an opportunity that's not true, not real, vaporware, phantoms and ghosts. Because by the time you realize you've been had, they've already gone down the road to someone else.